Okay, today we are going to talk about a couple of personal size shelter outdoor tarps, camping tarps, hiking tarps, bushcrafting tarps, whatever you may need shelter with you for. These are appropriate for personal shelter. The one here that we are looking at right this moment is the AquaQuest Defender Camo Tarp. AquaQuest makes another version of this one that called the AquaQuest King Camo. Same construction, same materials, different size. This tarp is 6'6" by 9'6", and it's just, you're only limited to your imagination as to how and when and where you can pitch this tarp. It has 21 total tie-outs. There are basically they're laid out in 3 rows. There are 7 along each of the long sides, and then 7 down the center seam, the ridgeline seam. All of the perimeter tie-outs are double stitched, 3/4 inch wide webbing. And the ones down the center are a little bit narrower webbing, but I think they're a little bit longer, and they stitch those down just a little bit differently. I'll show you that probably when we conclude this video indoors. I'll give you a really good look at that. For the moment though, I just wanted to let you get a good idea of exactly how much coverage you can expect from this size of a tarp. Last time I had it out here in this very same spot, I pitched it quite a lot differently, and there wasn't any headroom in that pitch. That's a lay down in it kind of shelter that I showed last time. This one, I think you can see that there's quite a lot of room here. There is just quite a lot of coverage. A couple of people in gear could lay down under this in a pinch. If things were you could sleep a couple of people and probably keep your gear dry under this tarp if you had to. I do consider this one to be personal shelter sized. It is this is pretty perfect for me and my stuff, and if I needed to configure it a little bit differently, for different weather conditions, it only really gets smaller from here. This is just kind of a modified lean-to with one side pulled down. One of the features that I really didn't go over last time I talked about this tarp, but I did mention it in my BCUSA versus the DD 3x3 tarp video, that this has some pull pockets, and we are taking advantage of some of those right now. We'll have a look. Well, we're taking advantage of one of them right now. This pull pocket is sewn right into the tarp. It's big enough to accommodate even large handles on trekking poles. I'm not using a trekking pole here. This is an aluminum tent pole that I bought some tent pole lengths and made some custom poles for some of my own purposes. I have the entirety of my pole in this pitch. We'll get in here. There's the other pole, kind of lifting that up. Although it isn't necessary, I guide it out on the outside. Just for stability. Let's get a look at the back side of this tarp. Okay, here is the back side of this tarp, and there are some features here in this tarp pitch that I talked about in the last video, or maybe the one before. But yeah, this is a you can see that this camo pattern is actually pretty good for my current location. Blends in here really quite well. Although the sun is beginning to go down, we're losing our daylight, but give you a pretty good idea of what this would look like if you came across it in the woods, or what your tarp might look like to someone who is passing by a trail. They might not even notice you at all. Okay, how I pitch this, I just put a tent peg in this corner, and then that other corner, that's where I use the pole in the pole pocket. Put a peg in right there, peg in a guy line right there, guy line to that tree. And I mentioned this as a possibility last time I pitched this tarp. Let's follow this guy out. To the forked stick. I ran the guy line through the fork and down to a tent peg. Yeah, that gives you a little extra headroom inside. And I mentioned that I used my second tent pole on the inside, but really wasn't necessary. Guying it out this way gave me plenty of headroom. I just wanted to see if it would fit. It's the first time I've tried that with that pole. As perhaps you can see here, that camo tarp also just really disappears into this environment. It has 16 perimeter tie outs. Around the outside of the tarp there are 16 tie outs, and they are 29 inches apart. There are also 3 ridgeline tie outs down the center here. In between these perimeter ones on the edges and just in the middle of the tarp there are 3 more. So the total is 19 tie-outs. Okay, what we're comparing the AquaQuest Defender Camo to is the DD 3x3 Multicam Tarp. This is just a basic tent setup, single pole in the front, couple of stakes, not quite all the way to the back, but toward the back. And the back folded under to give you a couple of feet of dry space if you need it for your gear. And I wanted you to know just how much space is under something like this, even when you don't utilize all of the possible space. Inside there you'll see my Climate Static V. That's my insulated version of the Static V sleeping pad. That's a full-size sleeping pad for a backpack. Lots and lots of room under something like this. Further demonstration might be somewhat pointless from inside the tent, but we'll take a walk around this one like we did the other one. Yeah, that's plenty of room. Now, in the last video I showed this tarp in, I used a different tent configuration, and it does offer more coverage. Covers up the front. You're covered on more than 3 sides with that configuration, and it covers up the front from rain and whatnot. And it's you know, it utilizes more of the tarp, so you know it can cover 2 people and a couple of backpacks pretty easily. This setup here, you know, you could put a couple of people in there. You'd have to be fond of one another to wanna, you know, to want to stay that way for an awful long time, especially if you brought your gear into the tent with you. Okay, just to show you how I did this tarp a little bit, these are my Z-Packs tent poles. These are my ultralight tent poles, and they are perfectly appropriate even in single configurations, even without doubling them up like that, for a tarp of this weight. I really like to double them up when I'm using them with the AquaQuest because it is a much heavier tarp. It's a pound heavier, so you know, I don't know what the limit of those is, but I don't want to find it because I don't want to buy new ones. Then just put in some tent pegs, and then this is where I'm not utilizing all of the space of this tarp. You see some of that is laying flat on the ground. Basically, I doubled under, you know, 30 inches. It's from one tie out to the next. I just doubled that under to give a little dry area inside the tarp to set gear or whatnot if we were in wet or snowy conditions. It's kind of nice to have, you know, a shelf inside to keep your stuff dry. And then here are the ridgeline tie-outs, and we will talk about the reinforcement and these tie-outs when we are up at the office a little bit later in the video. And then I guide this out. This is some shock cord. I could have used something sturdier and tightened this up a little more, but just guide that out to a tree, and then you know, continued on with the tent stakes. Okay, we are at about 50 feet from that tarp, and as you can see, that multicam just really disappears quite well into my environment anyway. Continuing the comparison of the AquaQuest Defender Camo Tarp and the DD 3x3 Multicam Tarp. These are both personal shelter size tarps, and what I mean by that is that these were quite literally designed as shelter building material for outdoorsmen. If you're a hunter, a hiker, a bushcrafter, a backpacker, a canoeist, a fisherman, a 4x4 enthusiast, a cross-country skier, a snowmobiler, whatever it is that gets you out into the great outdoors, these are designed as shelter building material. If you encounter weather conditions that require it, or some situation where getting covered up from the rain or the sun or getting some windbreak is appropriate, these are designed to do that for you. These are designed to help you make some shelter for yourself. And that's why these products exist. That's what they're for, is shelter. These aren't cargo kind of tarps. They aren't, you know, awnings. So, well, they kind of are awning. You know, you could make an awning out of this, a temporary one. It wouldn't be a big deal. But that isn't what they're designed for. These are designed to be carried with you, and, you know, to be available when you need to create shelter. Okay, we've seen these outside, pitched, you know, differently from one another, but in the same area there. I'd like to focus on the features these have and compare and contrast as best I can. Let's start with the AquaQuest Defender Camo Tarp. This is a 6'6" by 9'6" tarp. It has 21 total tie-outs on it. They're arranged in 3 rows of 7. Both 9'6" sides of this tarp have 7 tie-outs on them, and they're about 18 inches apart. The center seam has 7 tie-outs down it. 2 are on the perimeter and 5 are right on the center seam. Also about 18 inches apart. This is made from a polyurethane coated nylon material. Nice, quiet, thick, durable nylon. The polyurethane coating is very, very thick. I'm not sure I've seen this much polyurethane on another tarp of this type. If one exists, you know, please let me know down in the comments. I'd like to check it out for myself. That'd be cool. This does not appear to be a ripstop nylon. Normally with ripstop, you can see the grid pattern in it. Every centimeter or so there's a thread that's laid out. You know, there are threads that go opposite directions that are heavier than the threads in the rest of the weave, so it's designed to stop rips, just like the name implies. This does not appear to have that feature, but with all this polyurethane on this, and this being a nice strong 70 denier nylon, I'd be pretty surprised if you ever rip this. Okay, let's talk just a little bit about this camo pattern. This is a forest camo. You know, I want to say obviously, but that might not be obvious to everyone. This is a forest camo pattern, and very similar patterns to this are available on other tarps and all sorts of other gear, in fact, clothing and etc. As you saw while we were outside, this really blended quite well into the environment I had it in. You know, those juniper trees. When this is out in pines and cedar and etc., this blends in very, very well. The pattern breaks up nicely and hides among those things. You can very well go unnoticed if you're even relatively close to a trail if somebody's walking by. I like that quite a lot. Okay, let's move on to the DD 3x3, and we're going to come back to this. I'm going to show you the reinforcement and the tie-outs, and there are a couple of features that really kind of stand out as far as that goes, the reinforcement and the tie-outs. We'll come back to this one. The DD 3x3, this is a multicam tarp. And this is DD's own camouflage. They designed this. As you saw on, earlier in the video, this also blended in very, very well in the environment I had it in. This pattern breaks up nicely to the eye, even at relatively short distances, and I'm impressed. I really am with. I had this in a pyramid kind of structure, and it kind of looked like a big rock sitting out in where it was there. Even just 50 feet, it just wasn't all that obvious. Yeah, great camo pattern. This tarp is 9'10" by 9'10". It has 19 total tie-outs. The tie-outs are placed equidistant around the perimeter and up the center seam. They're 29 inches apart, and that's just how it is. There's 19 of them, and they're all 29 inches apart. Really well done. They're equidistant all the way around the tarp. That is the one critique I think I could give the AquaQuest as far as their tie-outs go, is that the short side of the tarp only has 3 tie-outs. They aren't equidistant. You've got corners and the perimeter center seam tie-out on the short side of the tarp. I'd kind of like to see those be equidistant. I'd like to see one in between the corner and the center on both sides, so 4 more total tie-outs on that tarp. But anyway, going back to this one, this is a polyurethane coated polyester material. This polyurethane coating is, and here's a pretty big contrast, this is a lot thinner than the AquaQuest tarp. The AquaQuest tarp is rated to a 20,000 millimeter water column. This one is rated to a 3,000 millimeter water column. Look down in the description for that article on REI to understand all that. That doesn't mean this one's bad or really even all that inferior to the other one as far as waterproofing goes. Wind-driven rain is not getting through a 3,000 millimeter water column rated tarp. This is still very, very excellent, but it's a big difference between them. And the material is also a big difference between them. This polyester this is a 190 Tex polyester versus this 70 denier nylon. They're about as strong as one another, but polyester remains pretty stiff, so it doesn't stretch. You can't get much stretch out of polyester, and it's a little noisy in comparison anyway. You know, I don't think it's noisy enough to drive you crazy. You're really only going to hear it when you're handling the tarp. If you pitch it properly and relatively tight, it doesn't make much noise in the wind because you can get it very, very stiffly, tightly, drum-tight pitched because it's polyester. The one negative I will give to the polyester material is that I personally think that its puncture resistance is quite a lot less than nylon, and that is because it doesn't stretch. You know, it won't absorb an impact very well. So, you know, there's a little risk from widowmakers, and I can also envision a situation where maybe you have a guy line and a tent peg pull loose and slap against your tarp. Yeah, I mean, I can really envision scenarios like that, and this isn't nearly as puncture resistant, in my estimation anyway, as nylon is. So, you know, even though this is very, very appropriate for its purpose, so is this. These are both very appropriate for their purposes. The nylon stretches some. The polyester really doesn't, so you can make a drum-tight tarp or a drum-tight shelter that you don't need to readjust at all, if very often, if at all, I should say. The nylon, yeah, you should readjust it every now and then to keep it tight. Of course, being drum-tight and not stretching at all, yeah, I do. I think that the puncture resistance of this is probably less than nylon. But it's very, very strong stuff. You know, as far as their load-bearing weight, tensile strength, this 190 Tex and that 70 denier are about the same. So, yeah, I think we covered that. Now, I want to get right into these features, you know, other than size and weight, and I guess I neglected to mention the weight of these. This DD 3x3 weighs 1.8 pounds. The AquaQuest Defender tarp, being 30% smaller roughly, weighs a whole pound more. It is 2.8 pounds. Okay, I'm going to reset the camera, and we're going to get to a point where we can take some really nice close-ups of these tie-outs and the reinforcements. That's where we're headed next, is these tie-outs and the reinforcements. And then after that, I think I'm going to give you some closing thoughts, and we will wrap this up. Okay, let's start with the tie-outs and the reinforcement of the DD 3x3. I am very impressed with the attention to detail and how they went about all of their tie-outs on this tarp. Every single tie-out on this tarp has been reinforced in one way or another. So let's get right into this. This webbing is a 1/2 inch wide. It's a nylon webbing. It's about a 1/2 inch wide. My calipers tell me that this is 1.1 millimeter thick nylon webbing. That's just very, very strong stuff. These tie-out loops are quite generously sized. You know, that's a pretty big loop, you know, a couple inches of diameter there, so you could put this on, you know, this could be on a little bitty string, on a thicker rope, hanging off a tree branch. You know, the imagination is your limit there, because they are very generous with those loops, and I really like that. I appreciate that quite a bit. It's all box stitched. Every place that a tie-out is mounted to this tarp, it's been box stitched. It's 4 stitches. So it's not just double stitched, but it's quadruple stitched and along quite a long way of, looks like 2.5 inches on this corner tie out. There's 2.5 inches of stitch, 2.5 inches of stitch, ½ inch of stitch, ½ inch of stitch. So that's a lot of stitching to keep it, you know, secure. I like that. This reinforcement material is a vinyl. It goes all the way out to the edge of these seams. So what we have here is doubled over tarp material along both sides, and then a piece of vinyl and box stitched down. So that's really nice and strong. And then the vinyl reinforcement is double stitched on the inside edge, and then single stitched with the rest of the tarp seam. Really impressive how they went about that. It's surprising to see that much, you know, attention to detail and how much thought that they put into how that would work, having really strong tie outs on a material like this. You know, the tie out's stronger than the tarp, so you need to strengthen the tarp to make the attachment points more worthwhile. Okay, let's get a nice close look at one of these perimeter tie outs, and this is a center seam perimeter tie out, but all of the perimeter tie outs, no matter where they're located, are done like this. This is another piece of vinyl in a triangle shape here, stitched into the outer seam. And then, you know, another nice piece of this really thick webbing. See if I can, really nice thick webbing, box stitched down. So there's 4 stitches, couple inches of stitch, couple inches of stitch, ½ inch of stitch, ½ inch of stitch. So there's just a whole lot of thread holding this to the tarp, through the reinforcement and then to itself. It's stitched to itself. These aren't individually stitched down. They're stitched right all the way through the whole thing. So yeah, this is just very, very well done. Now, while we're here, this is the center seam, and we're going to make a bunch of noise and just unravel this tarp at this point. The center seam is heat taped. All heat taped down, double stitched. It's kind of a circus stitch. Yeah, I believe that that's a circus stitch the way it feels. And it's double stitched down, plus being heat taped. Just really, really well done. And then let's find an interior ridge line. Got one right here. This is what the reinforcement looks like on the ridge line tie outs. There's a box here of the same material the tarp is made from, and then that's stitched down, and the tie out is stitched on, it's spread out instead of being folded over itself. It's attached at both ends of the tie out. We'll have a look at that in just a second. This is stitched down, and then the tie out is stitched to it in 2 spots, box stitched. And then that is heat taped to keep this reinforcement not only waterproof, but a little stronger than it might otherwise be. These reinforcement points are just wonderful. Here is the other side. This is a great big loop too. This is more than 3 inches of diameter. It gives you, again, a lot of options on how you might attach this to something and what you can attach it to. It's just a great big loop. And then you can see that this was box stitched down here and then box stitched down here to that reinforced patch, which is nicely sewn down. It's also pretty obvious from this side of the tarp that that is a really nice, thorough stitching job to get that patch on there. And yeah, so that's what we've got. These are, you know, really well reinforced. I like these interior reinforcements, not just for the fact that it makes the, it makes, you know, the attachment point for the ridgeline tie outs stronger, but also you've seen in the pitches that I've done with this, it gives you a place to plant a trekking pole or maybe a stick with a rag on the top of it, a piece of cloth on the top of it. Or in my case, I used my Z-Packs ultralight tent poles with some rubber ends on them. You can plant those right in this reinforcement area, and it doesn't stress the seam because this reinforcement is over the whole seam, so you've got an extra piece of material to keep you from spreading that seam apart by planting a pole in this and stretching the tarp over it. Just really gives you some nice options on how to pitch this tarp. So there we go. Those are the important features as far as the attachment points and the reinforcement on this one. Let's move on to the AquaQuest tarp. Okay, now the attachment points, the tie-outs, and the reinforcement on the AquaQuest tarp. These are there are some different features here and some different material, and a couple of things that are specifically really kind of cool that you won't find in another tarp. So let's get you a real nice close look at what we got going on here. This is a 3/4 inch wide webbing. This is also 1.1 millimeters thick, and you know, when I compared it in hand to the same to the webbing on the DD, I would almost bet they're manufactured in the same place. This material it feels very identical. You know, and its construction, the webbing construction, looks very much the same, and it's the same thickness, and etc., etc. You can see how this one is stitched down. This one's stitched down right to the outer seam, and this reinforcement material is also some sort of a vinyl or a vinyl coated nylon, perhaps. Very thick, strong, waterproof stuff. Very nice. And then this is box stitched down 4 times. There's a box here, a box here, and a box here. We can get a really good look at that on the other side. 3 boxes. So there's quite a lot of stitching holding that to a doubled over piece of tarp and a nice reinforcement material. The outside corner box is actually quadruple amount of tarp material, plus it crosses itself, so it's stitched to itself as well. So this is quite thick and quite sturdy, and honestly, I don't care how He-Man you are, I don't believe that this is something you're going to easily damage. This is incredibly strong. Even though the nylon stretches some, you can get some stretch out of that. The way they've done this is just very, very secure. I have no fear of ever ripping one of these out. Okay, let's move on to just a normal perimeter tie-out. The normal perimeter tie-outs, ones that aren't the corners or the center seam, these are double stitched, stitch there and a stitch there, folded over a double layer of tarp material. If you'll recall in the BCUSA Etowah Outfitters Ben's Bushcraft versus the DD, I mentioned that as something I'd like to see Etowah Outfitters do to step up their game, is give me double stitches. Well, not only does AquaQuest give me double stitches, but they fold this, they fold their tie-out material over a double layer of tarp material and double stitch it to itself. Very strong, very secure. Also, you know, no fear of breaking that. You know, I suppose there could be circumstances you know, you got a trucker's hitch on that and pull it too tight, yeah, you might do some damage, I suppose, if you've got some mechanical advantage, but yeah, you're not going to harm that under many normal circumstances. Okay, let's find the ridge line. And I think you can notice from me handling this tarp compared to the other one, very, very quiet material. I really like that. I mentioned it a couple of times earlier, but I really, really like how quiet this tarp is. Okay, here we go. Now, while we are here at this tie out, I want you to have a good look at what's going on here. Let me get this right up in the camera. Oops, I'm going the wrong direction. You see this? This whole material, that is the ridge line. And that is the same material. It comes right out here and loops under to form this perimeter tie out. That material runs the length of this tarp and has some other tie outs sewed to it that we're going to look at in just a minute. I don't know what pound test this 3/4 inch, 1.1 millimeter thick webbing is, but you're not going to find another tarp out there that has a ridge line that's built like this. You could probably swing gorillas and pickup trucks off of this for all I know. It's probably has some ridiculously high, this stuff, you can't even get stretch on it. And it runs the length of the ridge line. This is the strongest ridge line on the market. I am confident saying that. If you know of one built better than this, again, put it down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Okay, the inside of this perimeter tie out on the ridge line. And here's both of them, in fact. This tarp's folded over. So you can see the exact same situation on the far side of the ridge line. But let's just get one of them here in the camera so that we can pay good attention to it. Okay, we have a really large reinforced area. That's pretty big. That looks like about 6 inches by 4.5 inches or so of this vinyl material. This is all heat taped down. All heat taped down real nice, and the center seam is heat taped. And then we've got this, the tie out is made of the ridge line material, and they did something really cool here for you hammock campers specifically, and there could be some other uses that come to the imagination for this. See, here's our ridge line tie out, our perimeter tie out on the ridge line. They gave us a little extra facing on the inside, a little bitty tie out here. I think that this was specifically thoughtful for the hammock campers, having a second little loop facing toward the inside of the tarp. You can run a little ridge line for your mosquito net, for instance. You can utilize this to pull down the edges of the ridge line, or tie them out to something if you're getting a little slippage, without having to get out of your hammock maybe. Yeah, I think specifically for the hammock campers, this was a really thoughtful addition. Very, very, very thoughtful. Okay, now let's get to a ridge line, down the ridge line tie out, and we'll be done talking about the tie outs on these tarps. This is another narrower loop here, and there is no reinforcement on the inside. You can see where this has occurred, but they don't stitch that all the way through the tarp material. They sew it right to, I'm getting out of the camera here, there we go. They sew it right to the ridge line. This is not as generously sized as the ridgeline loops on the DD, but this is still very, very nice. A couple fingers in there plus, 1.5 inch and 3/4 diameter will fit in that. Really it's designed to be hanging on a rope or a piece of paracord or whatever you might use, but not as generous as the DD ones, which I could stick my whole hand through. But very, very strong, box stitched down to the ridgeline material, which happens to be 3/4 inch wide, 1.1 millimeter thick webbing. Okay, one last feature to talk about after these ridgeline tie outs and that awesome ridgeline. That is these pull pockets. I showed you these pull pockets, or at least one of them, when we were outside. I had an aluminum pole up in here, and then I guide this out to give it some force in the other direction. Yeah, this is super handy. All four corners have this, and these are big enough to accommodate even pretty large handles on trekking poles, or you could stick a pretty good size, probably 2-inch diameter or so piece of wood up in there, maybe with a piece of cloth on it. Yeah, just the features, there are some really nice features on both of these tarps for reinforcement and tie-outs. It's just really, really impressive. My only critique of the AquaQuest tie-outs is that they are not equidistant on the 6'6" sides of this tarp. I would like to see another tie-out somewhere between the ridge line and the corner on both, not just both sides, but both sides of the ridge line for 4 more tie-outs. I would really like to see them do that. But it already has 21 tie-outs, so just because my imagination can come up with a couple more pitches that could use extra tie-out on both sides of the ridge line doesn't mean it's absolutely necessary. They were already very, very generous with those tie-outs. Okay, I'm gonna fold these tarps back up, and then I'm gonna give you some final thoughts. And one of those final thoughts before I fold these tarps back up is the fact that a personal shelter size tarp, and in my estimation that is up to 10 foot by 10 foot tarp. Anything larger than that I see as being for more than one person. And I also see it as a bit unruly for one person to manage, pitching and folding it back up. This 6'6" by 9'6" and very heavy material is the easiest thing in the world to fold up. This is easier to fold up than a bed sheet by far. By far. The 10 by 10 tarps that I have, they are getting, especially if it's a little windy outside, they can be just a little bit unruly and a little hard to manage for one person, but only a minor struggle. But once you get into a 10 by 12, a 12 by 12, a 12 by 15, you could really use 2 people to pitch that and to fold it back up again. It's a whole lot easier, especially if there's a little wind. So again, that's kind of my limit for personal shelter, is something the size of the DD 3x3, that's, or the Etowah Outfitters, or Snug Pack makes one that size. A couple other companies do too. But 10 by 10 is about my limit for personal shelter size. All right, I'm going to fold these up, and then we're going to have some final thoughts. Okay, my final thoughts. What we've got here is, 2 very similar but very different products. Let's talk about the price first. This AquaQuest Defender Camo Tarp, 6'6" by 9'6". We went over all the specs and details. I paid $68 direct from AquaQuest for this one when it was on sale recently. Very happy at that price. I looked on Amazon today. I see a couple of people selling them for $69 and some change, essentially $70. That's a reasonable price. I went back to AquaQuest website today. They're getting $109 and some change, essentially $110 now for this tarp. When they went back to their normal retail pricing, $109 and some change, 110 bucks. That is an awful lot of money. At $68 to $70-ish dollars, great deal. I will recommend this all day long. Up to $100 bucks, I've made an argument in a previous video to buy this tarp even at $100. At 110 bucks, no, I'm not buying it for 110 bucks. That's what I'll say about that. At $70-ish, yep, it's a screaming deal. At $110, no, I won't buy it for that. There is competition out there for this type of a device from companies like Kelty, companies like Snugpack, you know, BCUSA, Etowah Outfitters, Ben's Bushcraft Tarp, this DD, and a plethora of other outdoor companies who sell tarps, tents, hammocks. You know, Hennessy has tarps. You know what? At 110 bucks, I'm gonna say no. I would not. If I needed a replacement for this tarp, even though I love this tarp, I would not purchase it at $110. If I couldn't find a deal from some other seller online at Amazon or one of the camping outfitters that sell these, I would forego it, and I would buy a different brand, and probably the DD. When I ordered this one, took them, you know, about a business week to get it to me. They're not all that far from me, so you know, I had no complaints. The DD, and some of this could have been timing, you know, some of it could have been timing, but I had this tarp in hand 48 hours after I ordered it. That was amazing. It came all the way from the UK, most of the way across the USA. It had a Royal Post tag on it, so Royal Post handed that off to FedEx, and I literally had it in hand 48 hours after I ordered it. That's good customer service. I ordered pretty late in my day, which probably meant it was really early in their day, and it could have been timing that really, you know, helped that process out. But yeah, that's good customer service. You know, they notified me when it shipped. Yeah, I was real pleased with how they treated me, and I am very, very pleased with this tarp. Our differences here are materials and size. You know, of course, the DD offers 30% more coverage, roughly, than the AquaQuest tarp. The AquaQuest tarp is even more waterproof than the DD, and you know, a real thick coating on it. So they've both done their tie-outs in a spectacular manner. If you recall in my previous video, I said, you know, what BCUSA, Etowah Outfitters, Ben's Bushcraft, what Etowah should do to step up their game, and that was reinforce the corners, give me double stitches on the tie-outs, and seal their seams. Well, both of these tarps have reinforced, double stitched, quadruple stitched, all of that and more. But this tarp specifically, all four corners and both of the center seam ridgeline tie-outs are reinforced, quadruple stitched. All the other tie-outs are double stitched, and they use thicker, stronger webbing for those tie-outs. So, you know, I'm going to say that this one's, you know, worth more, but again, not 110 bucks. The DD, I'm just very, very pleased with this. My situation right now is this DD and its little accessories. This did not come with any accessories. They will sell you almost identical accessories for, you know, more money to come with your package. Actually, they do have some webbing tie-outs rather than some nylon string, but you know, but again, you know, you got to pay for it. They aren't sending you anything extra like these guys did. I thought that was kind of cool. I did appreciate it. This isn't, you know, we're not talking titanium and Kevlar string, and you know, they didn't send me anything overly expensive extra, but they did send me some extras. That was pretty nice. This is now my summertime shelter. I roam a little less distance in the winter. I don't tend to go as far from where I start in the winter. So, you know, this extra pound of weight, this is 2.8 pounds, this is 1.8 pounds. They pack down to almost identically the same size. So the pack space is not an issue between them. This is my winter time. You know, a smaller shelter is easier to keep warm. That's just the truth. A larger shelter is harder to heat up and keep warm. This material, or at least the coating, is thicker. The 70D nylon with a really thick polyurethane coating to make it 20,000 millimeter, you know, water resistant. I think that this will hold heat better, although neither one of them is like a polycotton or something like that, you know, but I do think that this will hold heat better. So this is now my summertime shelter. This is now my wintertime shelter. And I'm glad I own them both. I don't have a clear winner between them, although at 110 bucks I do. You know, I'd say, you know, look around at the competition. If all your only choice was to pay full retail, yeah, I'd tell you to look at the competition. But this was 75 bucks. This one cost me 68. I think I got screaming deals on both of them. So there we go. You know, we'll see post-editing how long this video really got, but I'm going to assume it went way too long again. I really appreciate all the time you guys take to listen to me and watch me do these videos for a big chunk of your day sometimes. I hope the information I've presented is useful to you. I hope it makes you make good, I hope it helps you make good purchase decisions. And you know, I really hope the rest of your day just goes really well. Thank you again. Bye-bye now.